Hey everybody, it's Justin from the Camera Shop, and it's time for our Facebook Live recap on this week's Facebook Photo Challenge, and it is going to be your favorite lighthouse. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I ended up updating the camera that we use as a webcam here. This is the Olympus EM1X, and the firmware update totally changed all my settings and prevented me from going live sooner than I wanted. So without further ado, here we are, ready to go with this week's Facebook Photo Challenge. So, I'm going to start with just the recap on what the instructions were for this week. So, your favorite lighthouse photo tips. First and foremost, we always talk about inspiration, and as you would guess, the best way to do that is go to Google and Google search some things here. So I'm just going to quickly grab what I have done. So I'm going to go to Google, and my phone is actually listening to me and Googling as we talk too. And I'm going to just type in lighthouse photography. And as you can see, we've got all these different images that we can use as inspiration for what we're going to do. So I just click on the images. We've got silhouettes, we've got stormy days, we've got sunsets, some very dramatic, some black and whites. So there's a lot of different examples of what you can type in. This is just kind of general lighthouses. You can do Michigan lighthouse photography. And that's always a fun one. So you'll get Michigan lighthouses. As you can see, we've got Ludington, we've got Frankfurt, we've got Big Sable, we've got, that kind of looks like Muskegon, but it's not, it's Manistee. Just a slew of images for inspiration that people have already done as examples. And there's no shortage. Again, really, really great examples. So from here, we'll go back to the email and just kind of go past some of the other read-ins here of what the tips and tricks are. So the second is going to be light, and of course one of the most important qualities of a successful photograph is the quality of light. So after all, photography means painting or drawing with light. We talk about this each and every week when we do these photo challenges. So when capturing your favorite lighthouse, you want to capture it with great light. Great light will allow you to emphasize the space, structure, and atmosphere of your favorite lighthouse. Look closely to observe how light influences the textures, the contrast, the shadows, the reflections that define the structure of the lighthouse you are photographing. So be aware of the time of day and location of the lighthouse when that you're photographing. The best time of day is typically to shoot in the morning at sunrise or in the evening. That's when you're going to get the best light. Those are the magic hours. They talk about the magic hours or golden hours of light. You will get that time in the morning. You'll get that time in the evening. Evening seems to be a little bit more powerful because there's more color to the atmosphere. A lot of that has to do with the dust particulates that are kind of picked up throughout the day, and through the night those things have a tendency to settle down, so you don't have light pushing through those particles that are lofting in the atmosphere. So that's why you get a lot of this greater color towards the evening. So when we had those dust storms, or when there's fires that kind of sweep over and kind of come our way, sometimes you can get a lot of, because a lot of those particulates are in the atmosphere, we tend to get more powerful sunsets and golden light. So be mindful of that. Be mindful of which direction your lighthouse is pointing and which direction you're going to shoot it. And I've got a book here that I just slipped on. Because that's going to influence how you do your shooting. So, finally, don't be afraid to shoot in different kind of weather conditions, the stormy conditions, the cloudy conditions, because sometimes what you're shooting is going to have a certain mood. So sometimes a sunset isn't always appropriate, or clouds in the sky. It's just to each their own. So make sure when you're shooting, just be creative, put your own flavor on it. If you're shooting during the day, I always like to have clouds in the sky when I'm shooting my lighthouses. Sometimes you can get nice gradients without clouds. I might have an example with some of them that I'm sharing. But again, landscapes are more powerful with clouds in the background. That's just something that you'll see from time to time. Angles and perspective. Perspective is key in creating interesting photographs. Shooting from the eye level, just from your standard height level, is kind of the same old kind of vanilla flavor that we all get when we're shooting or when you see photographs. So the idea is to change up your perspective or your angle of approach to make things more interesting. So when shooting a lighthouse, I've seen a lot of people do something different as of late. I know Jeremy Church is really good at doing this. He has a kayak, so he's gone out in his kayak and he's shot back at the lighthouse. I had the opportunity a couple weeks ago to be on a boat out in Lake Michigan and shooting back at the lighthouse. And those are the times when you're out shooting from in the water, shooting back towards shore, you're going to get a different angle and perspective that most other people aren't going to get because you're willing to take the risk to go out in the water. So whether you do that just up to maybe waist high level with a tripod, or you're going out on some kind of floating structure, you can go ahead and get shots that nobody else is able to get. So make sure to use your perspective to your advantage. The other thing is going to be your lines, shapes, and detail. Keep your eyes peeled for horizontal, vertical, diagonal lines, and curved lines. Lines can lead your viewer through and into an image and create and imply movement and influence your viewer's emotions. So lines are very important. Use the pierhead that leads out to your favorite lighthouse as converging lines. Remember, I'll have some examples of that, but that walkway is a really good set of leading lines that lead you to your they're diverging lines, and that they will lead you to the structure that you want people to look at. And that's what number 6 is all about. Converging lines is technically known as the keystone effect. This is the visual distortion that you'll see when you get closer and closer to the point of the horizon. It typically occurs when you look up at a building, or you have, again, that structure going out to a vanishing point. This can be corrected by shooting from a higher vantage point. If you're looking up at a structure, you'll get that keystoning effect, the angles going up to a vanishing point. And you can also accomplish this by utilizing a tilt shift lens you can rent those. They're fun to use. It just helps to correct perspective distortion. When you're at a pierhead, it's harder to do because you're so close to the structure that it really doesn't help you. You have to be further away to correct that. Some of the suggested equipment that I suggest that everyone uses is going to be like a tripod is going to be the most important thing, because when you're shooting a stationary structure, it just gives you more control. You can shoot at a higher f-stop, like f8s or f11, just to get sharpness from foreground to background. Circular polarizer is very important. That'll help cut the reflection off of the water, or maybe the reflection off of the windows, or any reflective objects for that matter. So it'll help just cut down on that atmospheric bounce that you'll have on a building or glass. And shoot with a wide-angle lens or even a telephoto lens. So a telephoto lens will help you reach out further from shore and isolate the lighthouse against the background, versus shooting wide and having the lighthouse being very small. So that's just something to think about with that. So I'll go ahead and kill this, and we'll get back to some images here and share this screen. Okay, here we go. So everyone should be able to see this. Yep, we're rocking and rolling with that. So these are images from Kirk Montgomery, our gracious host at WZZM13's My West Michigan. This is one of his shots. I think this is somewhere up north. I think you've seen a lot of this shot with the frozen, a lot of the ice on it, but he just happened to catch it during a summer months, it looks like. But I liked his point of view here. I think he's on a boat going out on the lake, and just being able to capture the pierhead is just a really nice take on that. Let's see. There we go. So this is what I was talking about with the diverging lines, or that keystone effect, or leading lines. You guys can see that we've got these nice leading lines going out to the vanishing point, which is back here behind the lighthouse. So these lines will converge eventually to a vanishing point out past the horizon right here. And that's a good leading line. I mean, that's just your good old-fashioned right down the center, leading you right out to the pierhead. And that is, that's something that I like to see with shots. So good example of converging lines and leading lines. In this example, the pier, and he's got some nice clouds. We've got the rule thirds, like that top chunk is a 1/3 and the bottom chunk is 2/3. So that's a good use of composition right there between symmetry, rule of thirds, and leading lines. And of course, general landscape, we've got clouds. Like, so during the day, this isn't a sunset, this isn't a sunrise, this is probably early morning. maybe 10 o'clock or so, early afternoon. But because we have the clouds in there, it really adds some nice elements. If it was just a plain blue sky, it wouldn't be as interesting as it is with these nice kind of wispy clouds. Really liked his example of like a detail shot, so getting right up to the base of a lighthouse and shooting up. We talked about the keystone effect with that. We get this a lot with architecture when we're at the base of a building. It's just nice to be at the base of the lighthouse kind of shooting up and seeing it from a different perspective that we don't normally see the lighthouse from. We're used to this, we don't often see this. This is also one that Kirk shot out at Little Sable Point Light, and this is going to be recently because the shoreline has been eroded several feet. So the water used to be the sand used to be way out here, but as you know, the lake levels have been really high, and it's since eroded away. But it's nice, right-weighted image, kind of everything moving to the left out into the lake. With that, and similar thing here, very right-weighted. We got a lot of negative space to the left. It's a nice little element with this boat here, and we've got the structure here to the right. And I actually kind of like it out there, just kind of hanging out by itself. But the clouds add that extra element to it that's really nice. Let's see what's going on. Freezing up. Getting a little bit more of a, moving that, shifting that point of view from, being down the walkway and being closer up. I actually like this one too because the clouds are kind of coming out from it. And this would be leading lines or diagonal lines. So we're kind of creating this movement. So the clouds, even though they're stationary because they're frozen in time, we get this kind of feel and vibe of movement going this way. And a nice detail shot. This is going to be one that I shot of the... even though it's not a lighthouse, this is going to be the foghorn at Big Sable Point Light in Ludington. And I really, what I'm doing with this is I've got the structure here to the right, and I'm using the Milky Way to kind of lead into the foghorn. So I'm using the Milky Way as my leading line, like my diagonal line from corner to corner, and it's just kind of leading into the structure here. Just kind of doing a symmetrical take on a lighthouse. This is one of my favorites going back a couple years ago. A lot of people think that's the sun setting in the background and like, how did you get the space there? And really, we just got lucky with the moon setting, and the moon was setting, and of course, how do you take a good shot? Like, well, the moon to the right would just be this big ball of light behind the clouds, backside illuminating the clouds, and that wasn't as interesting as making it a silhouette. Sometimes it's really cool to create a silhouette from, with your lighthouses or objects in the foreground. It makes it more about the shape of an object versus the texture of an object, and that's what I was doing here, and had a really nice effect with the clouds in the background. Clouds add a lot of atmosphere. It wouldn't be as interesting without the clouds. The clouds add a lot because it's like this nice light starburst around that. Kirk is on, and he's saying he loves that foghorn. Are there any lighthouses on the east side of the state? That's what Sandy is asking. Of course, there's, as part of my write-up, I was talking about how many lighthouses there are in Michigan. I believe there's like 124 that are actually registered that you can find. There's like 200 and something, so there's another 100 some odd lighthouses that aren't on the historical register or public register for lighthouses. I've seen some pictures of those lighthouses where they're just kind of abandoned structures, so you can find them. They're all over the state. In fact, Michigan is one of the most has some of the most lighthouses out of any of the 50 states in the union. So Sandy, you can Google that. You will find a ton. If you just Google search Michigan lighthouses, there's a whole map. I encourage you to go find some ones that people don't typically shoot and share, because again, most of us are all West Siders, that are tuning in. So it's something that you'll probably see more of the West Side lighthouses, which is fine. We are where we are, right? But if you guys are feeling adventurous, I encourage you to get out and try to capture any one of the other 100 or so odd lighthouses here in the state of Michigan, because there are a lot of great ones. Kirk actually shared a link, and I can't click on this, but you guys can. So if you guys just click on Kirk's comment, it'll take you to what his search just was for the Michigan.org lighthouses. So you guys can check that out. And I'll get back into, let's see, Kirk is saying hi, nice vivid colors. So I'm just kind of looking at your comments, everyone. Hey Chuck, hey Brad, just want to say hi to y'all, and we're going to dive right back in. So this one is of Frankfurt. I tried to find some other ones that I had going through my images because, I've shot a lot of lighthouses in the evening, mostly at sunset. This was one of my favorites from Frankfurt, Michigan. We just happened to be driving by when the sun was setting, and we just lined up. We shot from the South Pier. This is the North Pier in Frankfurt. So shooting from the South Pier, we're able to kind of line up our shot, and kind of the trick is, if depending on what time of year it is, you can kind of put the sun at the very top of the pinnacle of the lighthouse, or you can get it right behind the opening or the window right here. You can actually see how sharp this photo is, which is pretty crazy. But a lot of people will try to light up the lit area of the lighthouse with the sun. Now, I've done that with the Pier Marquette lighthouse. I couldn't find that example of the image. I will look for many more, so when we recap and review your photos, I will try to find some more of the other images that I've created that kind of show how important timing is when you're framing your shot. So I just happened to get lucky with this, putting the sun right at the top of Frankfurt. It was a nice cloudy night, even though we have some clouds in the top. It actually kind of balances the weight. So we talk about rule of thirds. We've got that chunk of clouds on the top, which is kind of 1/3. We've got the bottom third that's water, and in the middle, we've got this nice little lighthouse sandwich, right? And that's all about creating layers in the photo. So it's actually kind of nice that we've got 1/3 of clouds, 1/3 of what's really important, and then 1/3 of the water, and it all complements itself and makes a great photograph. A lot of people, sometimes people are annoyed by people that are out on the pier heads. And in architectural photography, like we did last time around, architectural photography was one of our other themes for the Facebook Photo Challenge. It's nice to incorporate people into your photographs. The reason why this is that it creates a human element, and it also helps to set scale. We can see just how tall this lighthouse is because we've got people who are approximately, average height of a person's probably around 5'8", give or take. So anyone who's about 5'8", 6 foot. So even if we say, okay, most of these people are 6 feet tall, that gives you an idea of just how tall this lighthouse is at the end of that pier. So it helps to set scale. It helps to also let us know that this is an environment in which people exist in. So the human element is always welcomed, and sometimes it can work out really nice, and I'll have some examples of that later on here. So keep on tuning in for those. Yeah, the detail is crazy, Kirk. He's saying, awesome shot. The detail's crazy. This is where your camera does come into play. That I'm using a Sony a7R II, so that's 42 megapixels. The more megapixels you have, the higher resolution your camera is. So I'm using full res files, and that's why I can zoom so far in. I actually tried to make it a point to focus on I wish I knew the anatomy of a lighthouse, what that little top beacon area is called, but I made sure to try to focus on this manually. You can see I got great detail and sharpness in the clouds, and my people are really sharp. I got sharp water. So those high resolution sensors really do help with that. This is another one of my favorites. Of course, I'm going to have a lot of examples of little sable point light, just because it's really easy to get to. It's a really great place to shoot the night sky. I'm back lighting this with the Milky Way, and I've got a little bit of light from the rising, I think it's the moon or something coming up over here on the right. And this is going to be later on in the fall, because the Milky Way started to go this way. So if you shoot it earlier in the year, between May through July, August, the Milky Way is on an angle this way. So if you see any of my shots with the Milky Way tipped this way, we know that it's going to be pre-September. Anything prior to September, anything after September, it starts to tip back this way. It'll be more vertical in the middle of the night, and it starts to go back the opposite way because of the way that the Earth is tilting and rotating throughout the seasons. So again, this is something where I'm using a high-resolution sensor as well. You can see the detail that I have back here. We got a nice little shooting star or some kind of debris falling through space. You can see I got a little bit of movement out of the stars. That means my shutter speed is probably faster than 20 seconds, so maybe 25 seconds, just to get a little bit of that movement. But you can see just how much detail I have in the brick and the other attributes, how sharp the the trees are. Now you can see some grain in the image, and that's just from my noise. So I've got probably a high ISO, maybe 6400 ISO to shoot this shot. When you're zoomed out, you don't really see that so much. When you zoom in and pixel peep like I'm doing, you'll see that. But if I were to print this, you probably wouldn't notice it that much. This is going to be Manistee. We featured this on WZZM. This was another kind of passing fancy where, you know, we were driving, and it actually, this could have been, I actually think this was the same night. So we took that shot of Frankfurt with the sun at the very top of the lighthouse, and I think we got in the car right away after that, and we had to get back on the road, and I said, hey, let's stop in Manistee real quick, and we can get the shot of the lighthouse with the lighthouse in Manistee, and I think this could have been the same night. So it's kind of interesting to see the same cloud structure in two different places on the same night, and I'll actually have to investigate that, but I think this is the case. Yeah, I'm trying to zoom in on the pier head here to make sure that this is sharp. Again, that human element is visible. We've got some people fishing, some people walking, and that's kind of that nice little element. What I really tried to aim for with this was the birds in the sky. So I got this bird flying right here, and I saw him kind of cruising over here, and I thought, okay, I could get him above the sun, I could get him in the middle, or get him right over the lighthouse. What I'm trying to do is try to create some dynamic balance between the setting sun and all this lump of clouds with this little lighthouse and some lesser and smaller content to the left. And when we've got this big, you know, what I'm trying to do is, like, that bird was flying, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get him right as he flies over the lighthouse so that they're almost in line with each other. So that way I'm trying to create, you know, this rule of thirds. I've got this third right here where the line is intersecting the top of the lighthouse and going through, and then the third right here kind of intersecting through the sun, or actually just on the inside of each one. So, you know, maybe that line is right here and that line is right here, but we're dividing the image into three vertical points, and I'm trying to get the bird, the seagull, right above the lighthouse, because that creates more gravity towards that one thing, and we've got a lot of gravity because of the weight of the sun and the clouds. So there's that. This is one of my favorites. This is, if you guys ever get a chance to shoot the beaches or any of the objects down by the lake during the spring when the fog rolls in, it just really creates some really dramatic imagery, right? So I think of kind of like the movie The Mist by Stephen King. It's very foreboding and kind of eerie. And the fun thing about it, one of the local photographers, Allison Updike, she took a shot one spring, Pier Marquette, the swing sets. They had taken the swings off over the season, but the swing set was just kind of like the skeletal remains in the deep sand from the winter. But the fog had rolled in, and it was just kind of like this eerie scene of, here's all this mist and fog, and here's this swing set without any swings. And it was just a really powerful image. So I said, like, I need to make sure that when the fog rolls in, that I get out there and take a shot. And when you look at this in camera, there's some more blue color to it, but I made it black and white so I could take all that color out of it, so that's not a distraction, and made it monochromatic. And you can see that my detail is pretty good here. Still pretty sharp. I'm trying to aim at the lighthouse, make sure that that's good, and I've got a really nice sharp shot of the fishermen, but the detail's kind of obscured because of the layers of fog that we have to shoot through to get that. But again, one of my favorite shots of the lighthouse in the fog. Same pier head, Muskegon pier head, and this is just after, like, the sun is kind of setting, just kind of pushing some of the detail. You can see the sharpness that I've got here. I'm centering it up using leading lines. It's not that much of a leading line. It's just kind of this little hint going out to the end of the pier, and having this nice highlight coming from the sun having post set. So the sun's already down, and I'm just getting this nice kiss of light right here on the side of the lighthouse, and I'm waiting for this beacon to turn on, so you can see that it's red. I waited for it to turn on, and again, just that nice highlight from the setting sun right there. Let's see what you guys are saying here real quick. Claude is saying nice shots. Thanks, Claude. Kirk is saying epic shots. And good stuff as always. I appreciate it, Kirk. I hope this is inspiring for you guys. It's kind of like what you can do. The Northern Lights is really hard to get, but if you get a chance to get it, it's worth it. This just happened to be one night. This is the first time I was actually able to capture the Northern Lights. A lot of fun. You can see that I'm getting a little perspective distortion because I'm shooting with a wide angle lens, and the lighthouse is starting the keystone kind of going this way. And it's kind of distracting. I'm not necessarily a big fan, but if I go to correct it, it doesn't look right. But sometimes it can be an aesthetic taste that you can work with, and it's not too distracting. But it was a fun time shooting the Northern Lights at Little Sable Point Light. This was an older one that I pulled up from like way back in 2009. So this is when I like started shooting. I was just in school for photography, and I wanted to introduce some of my earlier work. Now, this is something that I haven't edited. I think this is straight out of camera, but I want to just kind of share it with you guys because it is all about the moment. And I did talk about I did talk about silhouetted images, going back to the image of a Little Sable Point Light with the moon setting behind it. And I've got this nice sunset. There's no clouds, and I've got this nice silhouette. This image definitely needs to be rehashed as an edit. So if I can find the original file, I should work on it a little bit and just see what I can do with it with post-production. But one of my favorite things is, again, the human element adds a lot to your photos. So the one thing that I really loved about this is that there were two girls and maybe a boy or something kind of sitting out at the end of the pier, and they're just kind of like bookending each other, kind of creating like this little, not like a little pedestal, but it's just they're kind of framing the sun just right. And when you zoom out, again, they're just right by the sun, and I got this nice little moment captured where, again, it's kind of that dynamic balance. Dynamic balance is when you have something that's really small and something that's really big, and they hold the same visual weight as far as they feel like equals. Even though one's tiny and one's big, they're holding the same visual weight in your mind. And that's kind of what we're seeing here, is that even though this is small and this is big, it doesn't feel that small because of how much our eye and mind are drawn to the smaller portion and the bigger portion, and they balance each other out. So I wanted to grab that. This is also the same night. So Kirk has that nice shot during the day going out to the South Pier Head here in Muskegon, and I've got something of an evening sunset way back in 2009, 2008, whatever it was, and this is kind of that nice gradiated sunset. Not as sharp. You know, if I zoom in, you can kind of see that it's soft, and that means that I didn't do due diligence on my autofocus when I shot this. That's something that happens with older cameras and just when you're shooting in the evening. If you don't have that difference between contrast, a light background and a dark object, you might miss your focus, and that's probably what I did here, or my shutter speed was slow enough that I just missed the mark. But I wanted to share these older images because of the just kind of showing where someone comes from and where they're going. Now this is around the same time frame. It was probably the same night. The sun was set, not the same night, it was another night, but within the same time frame. I think I was home for like 2 weeks from Minnesota. But this is the Muskegon Lighthouse, and we've got like a really nice layered cloud sunset. You know, we used to have these old Michigan license plates that had like that's the sun with the clouds going through it. This kind of reminds me of that. It's always fun to capture that big ball of light with the clouds hashing through. And this is just one of my favorite shots. Again, going back, I'm probably focused right here because there's a lot of tack sharpness here, and you can see that this is softer, which is indicating that my focus was more on the background and not the foreground. So this is an important point that I'm going to make with this while you're looking at this image. If I shot this in focus here, the lighthouse, instead of the sun, if I shot this at f8 and I put my focus on the lighthouse, I know the lighthouse, which is going to be the point of interest, is going to be tack sharp. And because things typically in the background will be sharper as the image goes through if I set the right f-stop, this will still be in as much focus as this will had I set my focus on the nearer object. And that's something that I would encourage you guys to do. If your draw is going to be the lighthouse or a person near a lighthouse, focus on them, make sure they're sharp, and make sure your f-stop is at the right f-stop, f8, f11, f16, something along those lines, greater than 5.6, because you'll get a greater depth of field. That means sharpness from foreground to background. And that's something that, a rookie mistake, anytime I shoot now, I am always focusing on the lighthouse, making sure that's tack sharp, making sure my f-stop is going to be, again, 5.6 or greater, typically f8 to f11, and everything else will fall into sharpness behind it because of the depth of field. This is something that I shot like a couple years ago. again, I'm going for the human factor. So we talked about the human factor. This is something I could still edit and really bring a lot of information out with the clouds and really kind of push the color. But I wanted to kind of show you guys the human element of this shot here. And again, it's just people kind of standing at the end of the pier enjoying the sunset. And I'm just the way that they're framed at the end of the pier is kind of the nice thing. Is if we had the walkway, if you could see the lines, it's right there. There's one, there's the other. It's leading us out there. And again, it's just kind of having two people right there against the big lighthouse. And I like this little accent right here of the plane kind of going up. That adds like some visual interest off to the left right there. Another one of Little Sable Point Light. Again, clouds can be dynamic. I was really out there to shoot the Milky Way. You can see the Milky Way right here. The moon was actually rising up back to the east. And that was something that, you know, it is what it is. Because the Milky Way is rising, not the Milky Way, but the moon is rising behind us to the east, I got great detail on the lighthouse, so I can see the brick in the detail. But I'm also getting like the foreground lit up and the clouds lit up, and it makes for a different image versus some of my other night shots. So as much as I like my Milky Way shots, this, you know, the clouds and the moon add a different element to the images. So that's something that you guys can do is, you know, not to be afraid of. Mike Hedge is saying he loves the fog and the silhouettes of the lighthouses. They're one of my favorites. Richard Kefkin is saying hello. So hi, Richard. Thanks for kind of jumping in. So let's continue on, and I hope you guys aren't getting bored. I'm going to real quick see on what kind of time I'm running on. So I'll kind of cruise through these. I'm kind of doing the same thing again, just working with the Milky Way, and this is Big Sable Point Light out in Ludington. This is Ludington's Lighthouse, kind of doing the same thing. And a lot of you guys, again, this is going to be kind of like a post-September thing because, again, the Milky Way is running up and down, not running on an angle in either way. So when it's kind of in the middle, we're in September, October, at a certain time in the night. A lot of people think that this is the setting sun back here. The moon just set a little bit before this, so that actually could be some of the moon, but a lot of the times when you're looking across the lake and you've got that orange light, that's actually the light pollution from Wisconsin from the other side of the lake, so that's what you're seeing there. The same can be said with this. This is one of my earlier shots of the Milky Way. This is going to be October because, again, we've got the Milky Way going at this angle, and this is going to be, like, not Keweenaw, but this is going to be one of those cities over there in Milwaukee. I would have to look at a map to kind of tell you what it is, but that's light pollution from that. Some recent shots that I haven't edited. This is going to be Point Betsy in Frankfurt, and as you can see, I've got this nice. I'm trying to frame the lighthouse with the trees, so the trees are kind of my foreground element. I'm really trying to focus on the lighthouse, making sure that's sharp versus the trees. Let's see how good I did. The trees are good, the lighthouse is good. So maybe I'm pretty sure I focused here because these are a little out of focus, just a tad. And this is going to be in the fall months. It would be much more interesting if I had clouds in the sky. And that's just my personal opinion because it just adds another dynamic element into the imagery. But that's one of my favorite things to shoot there. This was something recent. Again, if you can have a perspective that you don't normally see, getting out on a boat, or maybe shooting from the North Pier. There is a North Pier on the other side that you can shoot back to the lighthouse in the South Pier here in Muskegon. I always encourage people to do that. Shoot from wherever the lighthouse is, shoot from the opposing pier. That and be mindful of the time of day when you're doing it, because depending on what time of day or what time of year, the sun will be hitting it or maybe setting behind the pier that you're shooting. And this is just Muskegon here recently. The lighthouse isn't on, but again, I got this nice, highlight. I wish there were some more clouds in the sky, but again, I'm including human activity. We've got people kind of on their bikes. We got people sitting on the bench, and it's just kind of this nice atmosphere that we've got set there. But one thing I liked doing was, this was kind of the before with just the standard automatic mode, and I'm using the filters in my camera. So I'm shooting this with the Olympus. This is their instant film mode, and I'm just kind of illustrating here how much more interest you can have in the photo just by the way you edit it. So I'm just editing in the camera utilizing the instant film mode that the Olympus has, and I feel that this image is much more successful than this image because of, it creates a little more gradient in the sky. It's kind of like that postcard look. I like the way that the kind of the blue tones, kind of magenta bluish tones kind of just help help add interest to the image from the green tones. So that's just something I wanted to share, kind of zooming in, getting a little tighter of a crop. The weight kind of balances out nicely with the people here and the people here, and we've got like the symmetrical view of the lighthouse. Getting a little tighter. So this would be a good example of what Todd and Brad Reed talk about, of getting, like, take a shot, get a little bit closer, take another shot, get a little bit closer, take another shot, get a little closer. So this is kind of the idea of take a shot, get closer, take a shot, get a little bit closer. So I'm really just kind of focusing on the details, and just really I'm just enjoying the kind of instant film mode that the Olympus camera has to offer. Another shot towards the North Pier head, the South Pier head here in Muskegon, using the instant film. And this was much later in the night, so we were kind of coming around, and this is just where time of day really has its impact and influence. So you can see here that we're shooting back towards the north from looking at the South Pier, and there's not a lot of interest. There's no clouds out here. We can see that there's people on the pier and that they're having fun and doing what people do, but it's just a really boring shot. And just waiting, another hour or so, you can see how much time changes the feel and the vibe of the photo. So we've had some really great and fantastic sunsets as of late. This just got really wild. I do have some shots where you can actually get that ball of light right here. What I'm trying to do is try to frame it up so I've got it heavily right weighted and have a lot of negative space to the left, but I'm trying to get these nice little elements like the boat here in the foreground off to the left. There's another one off to the left. So I'm just trying to use those elements, kind of space and weight out the photo. But really it's about the silhouette, it's about the setting sun, just kind of getting that human element in there. But this is one of my favorites from just a couple weeks ago. Going back to Frankfurt over the 4th of July weekend, I am actually messing around with this. So the Olympus does like a really cool thing where it's multiple exposure. And what I tried to do was shoot the moon with a telephoto lens, and I zoomed in as much as I could with the moon, which was actually to the north, that's east, southeast, yeah, somewhere over this way. And I shot that as it was rising because it was the full moon. Fireworks were going on, and the sun was setting to the west. So all I did, actually, sun sets to the east, so it's in the east. So the moon's coming up. I take a shot of the moon, and I can use multiple exposure on the Olympus to place the moon with the setting sun. So this guy just happened to be out here because you can stay at certain lighthouses and kind of be a lighthouse keeper for a week or something like that. And it was just really cool that this gentleman was standing right here. The light was out on Point Betsy, and I thought it was really cool, like, hey, I'll put the moon right here. And it'll just be kind of like this guy, like on the Widow Walk, kind of observing what like the setting sun or the moon. He's really out there for the setting sun, but I got to cheat in the full moon right here and make it look like he's looking at the full moon without doing any post-production in Photoshop. So if I had my choice, I would probably get rid of the tree right here. Like I would crop that out and just kind of like center him in there, if I, just to create a little bit more visual tightness on the image. So I had fun with that. And then this is, again, going back to Point Betsy at a different time of the year. I think this is spring. It was or late, getting to the point of fall. It's just a really windy day. This is where clouds can be really handy. And again, I'm trying to use the trees as a framing element. So I'm trying to frame up some weight here to the left, a little bit to the right, and it just kind of creates this little window. And that's why I've got this dirt path right here. I'm creating an entry point for you to kind of move into, and that you're going to walk from here to here visually. And I really was trying to focus on the flag in the lighthouse, like, the stars and stripes. I think it's a very beautiful moment, and that you're kind of moving into the lighthouse through the bottom right-hand image of the frame. And then again, the trees, because they're blowing to the left, you can see that the wind is blowing really hard to the left, kind of leads you that way visually anyways. You kind of get hit with the tree to the right, so it's a stopping point, brings you down to the dirt. Now you're walking to the back towards the lighthouse. And again, the clouds kind of create this nice dynamic image. It wouldn't be as interesting without the clouds. Just trying to show the power of a sunset with a point-and-shoot camera. So this is with my TG4, just a little tough point-and-shoot camera. It's a great resolution. You can see it's a little grainy. That's just because of the noise. But that's really good for a pocket camera. And what I'm trying to do is waiting for that moment where the where this little power boat's kind of moving in and kind of waiting out the image from left to right. One of my favorites, setting sun. I did this handheld without a tripod with my Olympus camera. I'm waiting for this beacon light to be on. It's a little grainy. That's because it was handheld without a tripod. And what I love, again, is that human element. This guy's out there with his dog, and he's enjoying the setting sun. And it's just a really great image where there's a lot of great clouds. It's this really beautiful gradient, and that human element can add so much, because the mystery is like, well, who is that? Is it just one person? Look, he's out there with his dog. It's just a really kind of cool moment. And that's something that I encourage you guys to find, is add the human element. So that gets back to what Kirk had to share here. There aren't any more comments from you guys, so I hope this helps. There's a lot of imagery there. Again, I'll try to find some of my other greater moments that I shot of capturing the lighthouses, but I can tell you guys right now, there are a lot of images coming in, and I'm really excited to see your work and to share your work with everyone. We've got another one coming up with Kirk here this week that we're going to do. So we're going to bring some more of these to you. We're really excited to do that. I hope you guys are enjoying these little photo challenges. I hope you guys are being creative, and I hope this helps you kind of fuel the tank, so to speak, to go out and just create new work. And we're just excited to keep on bringing it to you. So if you guys have any questions for me, do not be shy. I'm here at the camera shop Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And someone is here for you Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we just want to see you guys be creative. So you have until next week, Monday, to work on your shots. So go out there, go nuts, have fun, and we look forward to seeing your guys' images here soon. So take care, have a good one. I'm out for the evening. Have fun, be safe, and as always, stay creative.